Jordan Industries' discriminatory hiring practices, documented through leaked emails and personnel records. Wage disparities that showed women and minorities earning 30% less than their white male counterparts for identical work. Safety violations at their manufacturing facilities that had been covered up through political donations and social connections. But the most devastating material came from security footage that had mysteriously survived 8 years in a digital vault, waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. "This is the recording from February 15th, 8 years ago," Phoenix announced as audio filled the room with crystal clarity. Harrison Jordan's voice, dripping with aristocratic arrogance. "That scholarship girl is nothing more than a gold-digging inconvenience. Make sure she understands that my son's future doesn't include trailer trash and bastard children." Colton's younger voice, weak but complicit. "Dad, maybe we should consider other options." "There are no other options. You'll marry the Wellington girl as planned, and this problem will disappear. Permanently." The recording continued for 12 minutes, documenting in excruciating detail how 2 of Savannah's most prominent citizens had planned the systematic destruction of a pregnant graduate student who'd committed no crime beyond loving the wrong man. "Public release is scheduled for tonight's evening news across all our affiliate networks," announced Catherine Marsh, Vera's head of investigative journalism and a Pulitzer Prize winner who joined the Rice media empire specifically to expose the kind of injustice she'd witnessed firsthand. "We have confirmations from CNN, MSNBC, and Fox Business for national pickup." "Social media campaign?" Vera inquired. "Trending hashtags are already prepared. Jordan Industries exposed, justice for Vera, corporate accountability. Our social media team estimates 15 million impressions in the first hour." Vera nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose revenge had been 8 years in the making. Every detail had been planned with military precision, every potential countermove anticipated and neutralized. "What about Jordan Industries' response capacity?" "Limited," reported Marcus Chen, her corporate intelligence specialist. "Their PR firm dropped them yesterday after rumors of the pending expose began circulating. Their legal team is focused on the estate foreclosure proceedings. They're fighting a war on multiple fronts without adequate resources." Perfect. Vera's smile could have cut glass. Initiate the campaign. Across the city, in Jordan Industries headquarters, Colton sat in his corner office, staring at financial reports that painted a picture of systematic collapse. 3 major clients had terminated contracts overnight, citing reputational concerns that his assistant couldn't explain. Stock prices were dropping steadily, and his board of directors had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. His secretary's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Jordan, there's a call from Channel 7 News. They're asking for comment on some kind of investigation." His phone exploded with notifications like a digital avalanche. Text messages from business associates, missed calls from investors, email alerts from news services, social media mentions climbing by the thousands. Every message carried the same ominous tone. "Have you seen the news?" But it wasn't just local coverage. His assistant's panicked voice crackled over the intercom. "Sir, we're getting calls from CNN, Fox Business, MSNBC, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and the BBC. They're all asking for comment on the same story." He turned on the wall-mounted television just as every major news network began running identical lead stories simultaneously. A coordinated media blitz that could only have been orchestrated by someone with unlimited resources and 8 years of careful planning. Tonight at 6, an exclusive investigation into Jordan Industries reveals a pattern of discriminatory practices, safety violations, and corporate cover-ups spanning nearly a decade. But our most shocking discovery involves audio recordings from 8 years ago that expose how the company's leadership systematically destroyed the life of a pregnant employee who dared to inconvenience their family plans. The investigation wasn't just thorough, it was surgical. Every piece of evidence had been verified through multiple sources, every legal document authenticated by forensic experts, every witness interview conducted with the precision of a federal investigation. This wasn't journalism, this was warfare conducted through media channels. The audio played in its entirety, Harrison's voice filling Colton's office with the same casual cruelty that had haunted his nightmares for 8 years. But hearing their conversation broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers transformed private guilt into public shame. The woman who stepped out of the midnight blue sedan was nothing like the broken girl who had fled Willowbrook 6 years ago, but Holden Jet Brennan recognized the grace in her movements the instant she appeared across the town square. Serena Aurelia Langston stood before the Victorian house that had once been her prison, her spine straight as a queen's scepter, her dark skin luminous against the white silk blouse that spoke of success earned, not given. The September wind caught the hem of her tailored coat, and for a moment she looked like something from a dream, powerful, untouchable, and heartbreakingly beautiful. From his perch behind the tall windows of Willowbrook's century-old library, Holden set down the leather-bound volume he'd been repairing and simply watched. 6 years. 6 years since Alaric Vaughan had shattered her world with his cruelty, leaving her pregnant and abandoned while he chased after his secretary like some pathetic cliché. 6 years since Serena had vanished into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and tears that had fallen like rain on the library steps, the last place she'd come before disappearing forever. Or so they'd all thought. Now she was back, and everything about her whispered of transformation. Gone was the uncertain young woman who used to apologize for taking up space. The Serena, standing across the square, moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire and emerged as steel wrapped in silk. A soft sound from the sedan drew Holden's attention. 2 small figures stirred in the back seat. Twin boys with sleep-tousled hair and faces that made Holden's breath catch in his throat. Even from this distance, even through the filter of car windows and fading daylight, there was no mistaking those eyes. Steel blue, sharp as winter sky, unmistakably Vaughan eyes. The boys appeared to be about 5 years old, the right age if she'd been 6 months pregnant when she left 6 years ago. The children of the man who had destroyed their mother's faith in love. Serena opened the rear door with infinite gentleness, her voice carrying across the quiet square as she murmured to her sons, "We're home, little eagles. Time to wake up." "Mama?" The smaller of the 2 boys rubbed his eyes with tiny fists. "Is this where we're going to live now?" "Yes, Kajika." Her voice held notes Holden had never heard before, maternal warmth layered over unshakable strength. "This is where we belong." The second child, slightly taller and with an air of fierce protectiveness despite his tender age, climbed out and immediately moved to his brother's side. "It looks like the house from the fairy tale book, Mama, the one where the princess finds her true home." "Exactly like that, Bodaway." Serena knelt to their level, smoothing their hair with hands that trembled only slightly. "And just like in that story, we're going to make everything beautiful again." Holden's chest tightened as he watched the tender exchange. These boys, Bodaway and Kajika, names that sang of heritage and strength, they had been shaped by a mother's love alone. No father's guiding hand, no masculine presence to teach them how to tie shoes or throw a baseball or stand up to bullies. Yet they stood straight and proud, their dark eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. Their mother had done that. Serena had raised them to be unafraid of the world, even when the world had been so cruel to her. The boys followed Serena up the front walkway of the house that had once witnessed their mother's tears. Holden knew every stone of that path, every creaking board of that wraparound porch. He'd walked it himself countless times, bringing Serena books when Alaric refused to let her leave the house, sitting with her on those same porch steps when her pregnancy had grown difficult and her husband had grown distant. He'd been the one to find the note Alaric had left, cold, clinical words about moving on and new opportunities, and how he couldn't be tied down by someone else's mistakes, as if their unborn children were mistakes, as if Serena's love had been some sort of inconvenience. Now, watching her insert a key into the front door lock with the confident motion of ownership, Holden realized that Serena Langston had returned not as a victim, but as a conqueror. The front door opened, and warm light spilled out onto the porch. Serena had somehow gained access to her former home, the home Alaric had abandoned when his finances crumbled, the home that had sat empty and foreclosed for the past 3 years. But there was light inside now, and as the boys ran ahead with excited whoops, Holden glimpsed moving boxes stacked neatly in the hallway and fresh flowers on the entry table. She had planned this return down to the smallest detail. "Mr. Brennan," Holden startled, turning to find Mrs. Olathe Winters, the town's unofficial keeper of secrets and official librarian emeritus, standing beside his desk with knowing eyes and a slight smile. "I thought I saw you watching something more interesting than bookbinding." The elderly woman moved to the window with surprising grace for her 78 years. "She's beautiful, isn't she? Even more so than when she left." "I was just—" Holden began, then stopped. There was no point in pretending with Olathe. The woman had witnessed every significant moment in Willowbrook's recent history, including his own obvious feelings for Serena Vaughan, feelings he'd never acted on because she'd been married, because she'd been vulnerable, because he'd been a coward. "She's different," he said finally, his voice rough with emotions he'd kept buried for more than half a decade. "Stronger," Olathe agreed. "Pain has a way of doing that, when a woman is brave enough to let it forge her instead of break her. Those boys of hers, they're going to shake up this sleepy little town. And from what I hear, she's not the penniless girl who left anymore." "What do you mean?" Olathe's smile was enigmatic. "Eleanor Pembroke works at the bank, you know, and banks talk to libraries more than you'd think. Seems a company called Blackstone Properties LLC has been buying up half the commercial district over the past 2 years. Cash purchases, no financing needed." Holden felt his eyebrows rise. "You think?" "I think Serena Langston learned more than just survival while she was away. Word is her grandmother's trust fund finally matured when she turned 30. Add that to a successful children's book publishing company she's built." Olathe shrugged. "Let's just say she's not the helpless girl who fled with nothing." Through the window, they watched Bodaway race back onto the porch, his arms spread wide like wings, as he called to his mother about the castle room upstairs with windows everywhere. Kajika followed more quietly, but his smile was pure sunshine as he tugged on Serena's coat and whispered something that made her laugh, a sound like silver bells that Holden had thought he'd never hear again. "Alaric doesn't know yet, does he?" Holden asked, though he already knew the answer. If Alaric Vaughan had known his abandoned wife was back in town with the children he'd never acknowledged, half the town would have heard his bluster by now. "Not yet," Olathe confirmed. "But he will soon enough. Eleanor Pembroke saw the moving truck this morning, and you know how she loves to share news. Give it until tomorrow's breakfast crowd at Millie's Diner, and everyone will know that Serena Langston has come home." Serena Langston. She'd taken back her maiden name, Holden realized, shed the Vaughan identity like a snake shedding poisoned skin, reclaiming herself completely. As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the square. Alaric Vaughan, still handsome in that shallow, practiced way that had once charmed half the women in 3 counties, walked with less swagger than Holden remembered. His clothes were expensive but slightly wrinkled, his face carrying the soft bloat of too much drinking and too little purpose. The man who had once owned the most successful real estate company in the county now worked as a junior associate for his former competitor, reduced to showing starter homes to young couples with more hope than budget. His marriage to Vivian Ross, the secretary he'd left Serena for, had produced no children and little happiness, if the rumors were true. Alaric's step faltered as he noticed the lights in his former home, the car in the driveway, the evidence of habitation where there had been emptiness for years. Even from this distance, Holden could see the moment recognition dawned. "And so it begins," Olati murmured, settling into the reading chair beside Holden's workstation as if preparing for a show. Across the square, Serena emerged from the house with a basket, heading toward the small garden that had once been her pride and joy. She knelt among the overgrown roses and began pulling weeds with efficient, practiced movements, her sons playing nearby with the easy comfort of children who felt safe in their mother's presence. She didn't look up when Alaric's car pulled into the driveway behind hers, didn't acknowledge his presence as he climbed out and stood staring at the scene before him, his former wife, radiant with health and success, and 2 children who shared his own distinctive features, but had clearly never known his love. Serena. Alaric's voice carried across the evening air, rough with shock and something that might have been regret. "What the hell are you doing here?" Now she looked up, and even from across the square, Holden could see the way she straightened, the way her chin lifted with regal composure. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, utterly without the tremor of fear that had once marked her interactions with this man. "I'm coming home, Alaric. With my children." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown, and Holden found himself holding his breath as he waited for what would come next. Behind him, he heard Olati's soft chuckle and the gentle whisper of pages turning, as if this were simply another chapter in the ongoing story of their small town. But Holden knew better. This wasn't just another chapter. This was the beginning of something that would change everything. Serena Langston had returned to Willowbrook not as the broken girl who had fled, but as a woman who had learned her own worth and gained the power to prove it. And God help him, Holden still loved her just as desperately as he had 6 years ago, maybe more. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above Willowbrook, Holden Jet Brennan continued to watch the quiet revolution beginning across the square, his heart pounding with hope and terror in equal measure. The woman he'd never stopped loving had come home, and this time he wasn't going to let her slip away. Chapter 2. Between the Lines. The morning light, filtering through the library's stained glass windows, painted rainbow fractals across the worn wooden floors when Serena Langston walked through the heavy oak doors, her son's hands warm in hers. "Mama, it smells like magic in here," Bodaway whispered, his steel-blue eyes wide as he took in the towering shelves that stretched toward cathedral ceilings, the rolling ladders that promised adventure, the cozy reading nooks tucked between ancient volumes like secrets waiting to be discovered. Holden looked up from the antique binding press where he'd been working since dawn, trying to lose himself in the familiar rhythm of restoration rather than dwelling on the sleepless night he'd spent thinking about rainbow-painted lips and eyes that held both heartbreak and hope. The sight of Serena in his sanctuary, their sanctuary really, since she'd spent countless hours here during her marriage, sent electricity racing through his veins. She wore a simple cream sweater that somehow looked like couture against her luminous dark skin, paired with jeans that suggested both comfort and confidence. But it was the way she moved that stole his breath. No longer the hesitant steps of a woman walking on eggshells, but the fluid grace of someone who had learned to trust her own strength. "Mr. Brennan?" Kajika's voice was softer than his brother's, carrying the careful politeness of a child who had learned early that adults weren't always safe. "Mama says you take care of hurt books and make them beautiful again." Holden's heart clenched at the formal address, but he knelt to the boy's level, bringing himself down to their world. I do. Would you like to see how? The twins exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that only siblings shared, before Bodaway stepped forward with characteristic boldness. Can you really fix any book, even ones that are really, really broken? Especially those, Holden said softly, his eyes finding Serena's over her sons' heads. Sometimes the most damaged stories become the most beautiful when they're given the right care. Serena's breath caught audibly, and Holden wondered if she understood the deeper meaning in his words, if she could see that he wasn't just talking about books anymore. "Boys," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, "why don't you explore the children's section while Mama talks to Mr. Brennan about some research I need to do?" Kajika's hand found his brother's immediately, and together they ventured toward the corner where picture books created a colorful fortress of possibility. Holden watched them go, noting how they moved as a unit, protecting each other instinctively. "They're remarkable," he said quietly, turning back to find Serena watching her sons with fierce maternal pride. "They've had to be." The words carried weight, 6 years of struggle and sacrifice compressed into 4 syllables. Then she seemed to shake herself, straightening into the composed woman who had faced down Alaric's shock with regal calm. "I need to research property records, Holden, deeds, transfers, anything public record for the Ashworth estate and several downtown buildings." The Ashworth estate, the crown jewel of Willowbrook real estate, a sprawling Victorian mansion that had sat empty since old Mrs. Ashworth passed 3 years ago. Holden felt his eyebrows rise. "Planning to buy?" he asked, though something in her expression suggested she was far beyond the planning stage. "Already have." The smile that curved her lips was pure satisfaction. "Among other things." Before Holden could ask what other things she meant, she was already moving toward the research section, her heels clicking a confident rhythm on the hardwood floors. He followed, mesmerized by the sway of her hips, the proud set of her shoulders, the way she seemed to own every space she entered. She settled at the mahogany research table that had been her favorite spot during her marriage, spreading out a leather portfolio with the efficiency of someone who had learned to make every moment count. Holden pulled the requested records, his fingers brushing hers as he set them down. The contact sent sparks shooting up his arm, and from the way her breath hitched, he knew she felt it too. "Holden," she began, then stopped, her fingers tightening on the edge of a deed transfer document. "I need you to know, when I left 6 years ago, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I had to. For them." She gestured toward where Bodaway was dramatically reading a picture book to his brother, complete with different voices for each character. "I know," he said simply. "I found the note Alaric left." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise and something that might have been shame. "You read it?" "Someone had to clean out the house when the bank foreclosed. I kept some things I hoped, you might want someday." He paused, studying her face. "Including something you left behind here, in the reading nook by the poetry section." Understanding dawned in her expression, followed quickly by embarrassment. "My journal. God, I'd forgotten. The night before I left, I came here to say goodbye to the only place that had ever felt safe. I must have dropped it when—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Holden remembered that night. He'd found her sobbing in the corner where she used to curl up with worn copies of Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, her pregnant belly making the position awkward, but her need for comfort overriding physical discomfort. "I've kept it safe," he said gently, "restored the binding where it was damaged, preserved the pages. Your words, they deserved to survive." Tears gathered in her eyes, threatening to spill over. "You read them. Only enough to know they were poetry. Beautiful poetry." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. I would never violate your privacy like that, Serena, but I couldn't let your words be lost. For a moment they sat in silence, his pale hand covering her darker one, both of them breathing carefully around the electricity that arced between them. Then the library's front door opened with its characteristic squeal of hinges, and Alaric Vaughan strode in like he owned the place. He'd dressed for confrontation, expensive suit, cologne that announced his presence before he spoke, the kind of aggressive grooming that suggested he was trying to prove something to someone. His eyes swept the library until they found Serena, and his face darkened. "So this is where you're hiding," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet space. Several patrons looked up with interest, sensing drama. "We need to talk." Serena didn't move, didn't remove her hand from beneath Holden's. "We have nothing to discuss, Alaric." "The hell we don't." Alaric's eyes fell on the twins, who had stopped their reading to watch the strange man with wary expressions. "Those boys, they're mine, aren't they?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. Holden felt Serena's hand tense beneath his, watched her struggle with an answer that should have been simple but was complicated by 6 years of abandonment and denial. "Papa." Kajika's small voice cut through the tension. The word wasn't directed at Alaric. It was a question posed to the universe, a 5-year-old's attempt to understand why the man with his eyes felt like a stranger. "No," Bodaway said firmly, moving to stand protectively in front of his brother. "Papa reads us stories and makes pancakes shaped like eagles. This man is scary." Holden's heart shattered and soared simultaneously. The boys had never had a father, but they knew what one should be. And somehow, in their innocent wisdom, they had already determined that Alaric Vaughan didn't qualify. "Boys, come here," Serena said softly, and they obeyed instantly, flanking her chair like small sentinels. She placed a protective hand on each of their shoulders. "Alaric, you made your choice 6 years ago. You don't get to walk back into our lives now and demand explanations. Those are my sons." Alaric's voice rose, earning sharp looks from the other patrons. "I have rights." "Rights?" Serena's voice remained calm, but Holden could see the steel beneath the silk. "You abandoned me when I was 6 months pregnant. You left a note calling our children a mistake. You divorced me in absentia and married your secretary before Bodaway and Kajika were even born. What rights do you think you have?" Holden stood slowly, his full height allowing him to look down at Alaric for the first time in their acquaintance. "I think you should leave." "This is none of your business, Brennan," Alaric snarled. But there was something uncertain in his eyes now, something that suggested he was beginning to realize he'd walked into a situation where he wasn't the one with power. "Actually," Holden said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made people listen, "this is my library. These are my patrons, and you're disturbing the peace." For a moment, the two men stared at each other, Alaric with his artificial posturing and expensive clothes, Holden with his quiet strength and genuine presence. The contest of wills lasted only seconds, but when it ended, Alaric was the one who looked away first. "This isn't over, Serena," he said, backing toward the door. "Those boys are Vaughans, whether you like it or not. And I intend to know my sons." "My name is Langston," Bodaway announced clearly, his 5-year-old voice carrying surprising dignity. "We're eagles, not whatever you are." Alaric's face flushed red, but before he could respond, the library door swung shut behind him with a satisfying thud. In the silence that followed, Serena pulled her sons close, and Holden watched the 3 of them form a protective circle that needed no one else. Yet when Serena looked up at him over their heads, her eyes held gratitude and something deeper, something that looked like recognition. "Thank you," she whispered. Holden nodded, his heart pounding with protective fury and helpless love. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Willowbrook, and he had the feeling that Alaric's departure was only the beginning of the tempest to come. But watching Serena comfort her brave little sons, seeing the way they trusted her completely to keep them safe, Holden knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would stand between them and any storm, for as long as she would let him. Some things were worth fighting for. This family, this woman, these remarkable children, they were worth everything. Chapter 3. Threads of the Past. The antique Steinway piano arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by 4 careful men who handled the ebony instrument like it held the secrets of the universe. Tallulah Winters watched from her friend's front porch as they maneuvered the piano through the Ashworth Estate's front door, her knowing smile growing wider with each careful step. She'd driven up from Boston the moment Serena had called, abandoning her law practice for 3 days to witness what she privately called the most elegant revenge in modern history. "Your grandmother's piano," she murmured as Serena joined her on the wraparound porch, coffee steaming between their hands. "I remember when Alaric made you sell it to pay for his business expansion." "Made is a generous term," Serena replied, her voice carrying the kind of steel that came from years of hard-earned wisdom. "Manipulated, guilted, and emotionally blackmailed would be more accurate. He knew exactly how much that piano meant to me." Tallulah studied her oldest friend's profile, the strong jaw that had always hinted at hidden strength, the high cheekbones that spoke of ancestral pride, the eyes that had learned to see clearly through tears. "And now I bought it back from the collector who purchased it, for 3 times what Alaric sold it for." Serena's smile held satisfaction sharp as a blade. "Along with the Tiffany lamp that belonged to my mother, the first edition Langston Hughes collection that was my father's pride, and every other piece of my heritage that man convinced me to sacrifice for his dreams." Inside the house, they could hear Bodaway and Kajika's excited voices as they discovered each restored treasure, their joy echoing through rooms that had stood empty too long. The boys had adapted to their new home with the resilience of children who trusted their mother completely, treating the mansion like a grand adventure rather than a symbol of reclaimed power. "Tell me about the buildings downtown," Tallulah said, settling deeper into the porch swing that had been Serena's first addition to the house. "My sources say someone's been quietly buying up half of Willowbrook's commercial district." Serena's laugh was rich with secrets. "Blackstone Properties LLC has been very active in the local market, paying cash, closing fast, no negotiations." "Blackstone Properties being—" "A company I established in Delaware 4 years ago, once my grandmother's trust fund matured and my publishing company started turning serious profit." Serena sipped her coffee, watching her sons chase each other around the oak trees that dotted the estate's front lawn. Anonymous ownership, impeccable credit, and a talent for acquiring properties right before they go into foreclosure. Tallulah let out a low whistle. "How many?" "The bakery, where we had our first date. The bookstore where we spent our anniversary. The little cafe where he proposed." Serena's voice remained conversational, but her eyes held the focus of a predator. "The office building where his company was headquartered, the warehouse he was going to convert into luxury condos, even the parking lot behind Millie's Diner." "Jesus, Serena, you basically own downtown Willowbrook." "I own the parts that mattered to us, to who I used to be." She set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Every place he made a memory with me, every space where he made me feel small or unworthy or grateful for his attention. I own all of it now." The front door opened, and Holden appeared with an armload of books, looking slightly disheveled and entirely too attractive for 10 in the morning. He'd been helping the boys organize their new library, a sun-filled room on the 2nd floor that Serena had designated specifically for them, and his gentle patience with her sons had been both heartwarming and heartbreaking to witness. "The boys want to know if you have any books about eagles," he called, settling the stack on the porch table. Apparently, they're writing a story about twin eagles who go on adventures. Check the nature section in my study, Serena replied, then added more softly. Thank you for helping them settle in. They don't usually warm up to new people so quickly. Holden's smile was gentle, transformative. They're remarkable children, curious, kind, protective of each other. They're a testament to their mother. Tallulah cleared her throat pointedly, and both Serena and Holden startled, as if they'd forgotten her presence. The electricity between them was so thick she could have cut it with her legal brief. I'm Tallulah, she announced, extending her hand to Holden, the friend who's been hearing about the handsome librarian for 6 years. Tallulah, Serena warned, but her cheeks had darkened with embarrassment. What? It's true. Tallulah shook Holden's hand firmly, studying his face with a lawyer's eye for detail. You're exactly what she described, gentle but strong, intelligent without being condescending, and you look at her like she hung the moon. I dot. Holden glanced at Serena, his expression uncertain. I should probably check on the boys. He retreated into the house, and Tallulah watched Serena's face transform with longing and fear in equal measure. You're in love with him, she observed. I'm rebuilding my life, Serena corrected. Love is a luxury I can't afford right now. Bullshit. Tallulah's voice was gentle but firm. Love isn't a luxury, honey. It's oxygen, and that man in there, he's been holding his breath for 6 years, waiting for you to come home. Before Serena could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. A silver BMW pulled into the circular drive, and Vivian Vaughn stepped out like she was walking a red carpet. Alaric's wife had aged well, blonde hair still perfect, figure still trim in that particular way that spoke of expensive personal trainers and careful dieting. But there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago, a tightness to her mouth that suggested disappointment had become a frequent companion. Well, Tallulah murmured, this should be interesting. Vivian climbed the porch steps with careful poise, her designer heels clicking against the wooden boards. Serena, you look, well, Vivian. Serena's voice gave nothing away. What can I do for you? I think the question is what I can do for you. Vivian glanced around the restored porch, taking in the comfortable furniture, the hanging flower baskets, the obvious signs of a home filled with love. May I sit? Serena gestured to an empty chair, and Vivian perched on its edge like she might need to run. Alaric doesn't know I'm here, she began without preamble. He thinks I'm at the spa in Portland, but I needed to talk to you before things get worse. Worse how? Tallulah asked, her lawyer instincts immediately alert. Vivian's laugh was bitter. He's been meeting with attorneys, trying to figure out how to claim parental rights to those boys without acknowledging that he abandoned them. He wants to paint you as an unfit mother who disappeared for 6 years with his children. Serena's composure never wavered, but Tallulah saw her hands tighten imperceptibly on her coffee cup. Is that what he told you happened? That I disappeared with his children? No. Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. I was there, remember? I was the secretary he left you for. I know exactly what kind of man I married, and I know exactly what he did to you. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and raw and utterly unexpected. Why are you telling me this? Serena asked. Because I've spent 6 years living with the guilt. Vivian's perfect composure began to crack. Because he destroyed you to be with me, and then spent our entire marriage wishing you would come back so he could destroy you again. Because those beautiful boys in there deserve better than a father who sees them as possessions to claim rather than children to love. Through the open windows, they could hear Bodaway's voice reading to his brother, practicing the story they were writing about brave eagles who protected each other no matter what. The innocent sound seemed to strengthen Vivian's resolve. "He's planning to file for emergency custody next week," she continued, "claiming you're an unstable influence who kept his children from him. He wants to use your financial success against you, paint you as some kind of calculating manipulator who's trying to buy your way back into respectability." "Let him try," Tallulah said grimly. "I'd love to cross-examine him about abandoning a pregnant wife." "There's more." Vivian looked directly at Serena now, her blue eyes bright with unshed tears. "He knows about the properties you've been buying. He's figured out that you're behind Blackstone Properties, and he's furious. He's talking about contesting the sales, claiming emotional distress, anything to hurt you financially." Serena was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the careful consideration of someone who had learned to think 3 moves ahead. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why are you warning me? Why risk your marriage to help me?" Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that shook slightly. "Because I destroyed one family already. I won't be responsible for destroying another." She paused at the top of the porch steps. "And because those boys remind me of the children Alaric and I never had. The children he said he wanted but somehow never got around to actually wanting." She walked back to her car, then turned for one final comment. "For what it's worth, Serena, I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserve so much better." The BMW disappeared down the tree-lined drive, leaving silence in its wake. "Well," Tallulah said finally, "that was unexpected." Serena stood and walked to the porch railing, gripping it with both hands as she stared out at the estate's manicured gardens. "He's going to fight dirty." "Of course he is. But you're not the scared girl he left behind, and you've got resources now. Money, property, respectability, and more importantly, you've got documentation of his abandonment." Tallulah joined her at the railing. "The question is, what are you going to do about Holden?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that man is desperately in love with you, and if Alaric gets wind of it, he'll use it against you. Paint you as some kind of seductress who abandoned her marriage for another man." Serena's laugh was hollow. "Holden and I there was never anything inappropriate. He was just kind. The only person who saw me as more than Alaric's accessory. And now I'm terrified," Serena admitted quietly. "Terrified that if I let myself feel anything for him, Alaric will find a way to use it against my boys. Terrified that I'll drag Holden into a battle he never asked for. Terrified that I'm not brave enough to choose love over safety." Through the window, they heard Holden's deep laugh mixing with her son's giggles, and Serena's face softened with longing so profound it made Tallulah's chest ache. "Honey," she said gently, "sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be happy." But as storm clouds gathered over Willowbrook's autumn sky, Serena wondered if happiness was a risk she could afford to take, especially when her children's futures hung in the balance. The war for her family had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Weight of Words. The journal lay between them on Holden's workbench like a bridge across 6 years of silence, its leather binding restored to supple perfection, its pages rescued from time and tears with infinite care. "I found it in the poetry section," Holden said softly, his fingers tracing the air above the cover without quite touching it. "The night before you left. You'd been crying, and when you saw me coming, you ran. But you left this behind." Serena's breath caught in her throat as she recognized her own careful handwriting on the restored cover. "Words for when there are no words. S.A. Langston." The girl who had written that title felt like a stranger now, hopeful, naive, still believing that love could conquer all obstacles. "I haven't opened it," Holden continued, his voice rough with emotion, but I could see through the damaged binding that it was poetry, your poetry, and I knew it needed to be preserved. They stood in his private workshop behind the library, surrounded by the tools of his trade, bone folders and awls, gilding brushes and leather-working knives, bottles of archival glue and sheets of handmade paper. The late afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Serena reached for the journal with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of her younger self's dreams and despair. I thought I'd lost it forever. Some things are too important to lose, Holden said quietly, and she knew he wasn't just talking about books anymore. She opened to a random page, and her own words stared back at her in blue ink faded to the color of twilight. I am learning the difference between love that lifts and love that lowers. One teaches you to fly, the other clips your wings and calls it protection. God, she whispered, remembering the night she'd written those lines, pregnant and alone while Alaric worked late with his secretary. I was so young, so lost. You were finding yourself, Holden corrected gently. Even then, even in the middle of all that pain, you were writing truth. She flipped to another page, this one dated just days before Bodaway and Kajika were born. When they ask me what I want for my children, I will not say wealth or fame or easy roads. I will say I want them to know their own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. They do, Holden said, reading over her shoulder. Know their worth, I mean. Those boys carry themselves like princes who happen to be 6 years old. Serena laughed through sudden tears. They're my greatest achievement. Not the business, not the properties. Them. They're proof that something beautiful can grow from broken ground. Like you did. The words hung between them, soft as a whisper, strong as a promise. Serena looked up to find Holden's grey eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her pulse flutter. Holden. Mama. They sprang apart as Bodaway appeared in the workshop doorway, his dark hair mussed from running, his school backpack sliding off one small shoulder. Behind him, Kajika followed more quietly, always the observer, always protective of his brother's boldness. Hey, little eagle, Serena said, quickly closing the journal and moving to embrace her son. How was your second week at Willowbrook Elementary? It was good, Bodaway said, but there was something uncertain in his voice. The teacher is nice, and the other kids are okay, but what? Kajika stepped forward, slipping his hand into his mother's. Some of the kids asked why we have different last names than our daddy. Serena's heart clenched. What did you tell them? That we don't have a daddy, Bodaway said matter-of-factly. We have you, and that's enough. But then Tyler Morrison said everybody has a daddy somewhere, and that if ours didn't want us, there must be something wrong with us. The casual cruelty of children's honesty hit Serena like a physical blow. She knelt to her son's level, pulling them both close. Listen to me, she said fiercely. There is nothing wrong with you. Nothing. You are perfect and beautiful and loved beyond measure. Sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with the children they hurt. That's not about you. That's about them. But why? Kajika's small voice was barely above a whisper. Why doesn't he want to know us? Before Serena could answer, Holden spoke from behind her. Can I tell you boys a story? Both children looked at him with the kind of trust that came from hours spent reading together, from patient answers to endless questions, from a man who never seemed too busy for their curiosity. There's a Cherokee legend, Holden began, settling cross-legged on the workshop floor so he was at their eye level, about twin eagles who were born in a nest high on a mountain. Their father was the strongest eagle in the sky, but he was also proud and selfish. He wanted sons who would make him look powerful, not sons he would have to care for and teach. Bodaway and Kajika exchanged a look, recognizing themselves in the story. When the twin eagles were still small, their father flew away to find a newer, prettier nest with a different mate. He told himself that his sons weren't strong enough to be worth his time. "That's sad," Kajika whispered. "It was," Holden agreed. "But here's the thing about eagles. They're born knowing how to soar. The twin eagles didn't need their father to teach them to fly. Their mother was wise and strong, and she taught them that their worth came from inside themselves, not from whether someone else could see it." "What happened to them?" Bodaway asked, leaning forward with interest. "They grew up to be the most magnificent eagles in the mountains. They protected their mother, they cared for each other, and they soared higher than any eagle before them. And do you know what the best part was?" Both boys shook their heads. They realized that having a father who couldn't see their worth wasn't a loss, it was his loss. They were perfect exactly as they were, with the family they'd chosen and the love they'd built together. Serena felt tears slip down her cheeks as she watched her sons process this wisdom, saw understanding dawn in their young faces. "Are we like the twin eagles?" Kajika asked. "Exactly like them," Holden said softly. "Strong and brave and perfect, with a mother who would move mountains to protect you. And you're like the wise owl who helps them," Bodaway announced with the decisive logic of childhood. "You tell good stories and fix hurt things and make Mama smile." Holden's eyes found Serena's over their children's heads, and the longing there was so intense it took her breath away. "I would like that very much," he said quietly, "being part of your story." Before Serena could respond to the weight of that statement, the workshop door burst open and Alaric Vaughan stood framed in the doorway, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "There you are," he slurred, pointing an accusatory finger at the boys. "My sons, hidden away with this nobody while their real father—" "Get out," Serena said sharply, rising to her feet and moving protectively in front of her children. "You have no right to be here." "I have every right," Alaric's voice rose to a shout. "Those are my boys, my blood, and I won't have them raised by some librarian who thinks he can play daddy." Bodaway stepped forward with surprising courage, his 6-year-old frame vibrating with protective fury. "He doesn't play daddy. He is our daddy. He reads to us and helps with our stories and knows how to make pancakes that look like eagles. You're just the mean man who yells at Mama." Alaric's face darkened with rage, and he took a menacing step toward the child. "You little brat, I'll teach you some respect." He never finished the sentence. Holden moved with surprising speed for such a gentle man, placing himself between Alaric and the boys with the kind of quiet authority that spoke of absolute conviction. "Touch them and you'll regret it," he said, his voice deadly calm. For a moment, the two men faced each other. Alaric with his bloated rage and expensive clothes, Holden with his lean strength and protective stillness. There was no contest. Alaric might have had the advantage of size and aggression, but Holden had something more powerful, the absolute certainty that he was protecting something precious. "This isn't over," Alaric snarled, backing toward the door. "Those boys are mine, and I'll prove it. I'll take them away from both of you." He stumbled out, leaving the workshop silent, except for the sound of Kajika's quiet crying. Serena gathered her sons close, her own tears falling freely now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to see that." "Mama," Bodaway said seriously, his small hand patting her shoulder with adult-like comfort. "We don't want him to be our daddy. We want Mr. Holden." "He's already our daddy in here," Kajika added, pointing to his heart with the devastating honesty of childhood. "Can't we just make it real?" Serena looked at Holden through her tears, seeing her own longing reflected in his face. But between them stood the shadow of Alaric's threats, the fear of a custody battle, the knowledge that choosing love might put her children at risk. "I don't know," she whispered, the words breaking her heart even as she spoke them. "I just don't know." Outside, storm clouds gathered over Willowbrook, and Serena wondered if she was brave enough to reach for happiness when the stakes were her children's future. Some choices demanded everything. This felt like one of them. Chapter 5. Storms and Stillness. The first thundercrack split the October sky just as Serena realized she'd left her car keys on Holden's workshop counter, and the boys were already soaked to the skin before they'd made it halfway across the library's parking lot. "Mama, I can't see!" Kajika called through the driving rain, his small hand gripping hers with desperate strength as wind whipped around them like something alive and angry. "Back to the library!" Holden shouted over the storm's roar, scooping Bodaway into his arms without hesitation. "We'll wait it out!" They burst through the heavy oak doors like refugees from a shipwreck, dripping and breathless and laughing despite themselves. The library's familiar quiet wrapped around them like a warm embrace, the storm's fury muffled to a distant drumming against the windows. "Oh my goodness," came Olathe's concerned voice from behind the circulation desk. "You're all drenched. Let me get some towels from the staff room." But she was already gone before anyone could protest, leaving the small family alone in the library's amber-lit sanctuary. Outside, lightning split the sky in brilliant white fractures, followed immediately by thunder so close it rattled the stained glass windows. "This is no ordinary storm," Holden murmured, his arms still around Bodaway's small form. "The weather service didn't predict anything like this." Serena wrung water from her hair, acutely aware of how her white blouse had become translucent. How Holden's eyes kept drifting to her face and away again with the kind of careful respect that made her heart ache. They were stranded together, the four of them, in this place that had always been their sanctuary. "Are we stuck here?" Bodaway asked, but there was excitement rather than fear in his voice. Being trapped in a library full of stories felt like an adventure, not a prison. "For a while," Holden confirmed, accepting towels from Olathe with grateful hands. "But that's not such a terrible thing, is it? We've got books, we've got snacks in the staff room, and we've got each other." The simple statement, "we've got each other," hit Serena like lightning. When had this gentle man become such an essential part of their world? When had her sons started looking to him for comfort and guidance as naturally as they breathed? Olathe appeared with an armload of spare clothes, sweatshirts and yoga pants from the library's lost and found, clean and dry if not perfectly fitted. "There's a family restroom down the hall where you can change," she said kindly. "I'll stay up here and keep watch for when the storm passes." 20 minutes later, they were all warm and dry, gathered in the library's children's section while the storm raged outside. Holden had somehow managed to look dignified, even in a too-small sweatshirt that read, "Willowbrook Tigers Soccer Mom," while Serena wore an oversized hoodie that fell to her knees. The boys had found matching T-shirts that proclaimed them future librarians, which they wore with enormous pride. "Tell us about the shadow puppets," Kajika said, settling close to Holden's side with the trust of a child who had never known betrayal from safe adults. "Shadow puppets?" Serena asked, curious. Holden's smile was slightly embarrassed. "I've been learning. There's a wonderful book about it in the arts section, and I thought the boys might enjoy it." He moved to the reading area's wall lamp, adjusting it so the light cast clear shadows on the pale wall. Then, with his hands, he began to create magic. A rabbit appeared first, ears twitching as thunder rolled overhead, then a wolf, howling silently at the storm. Finally, 2 eagles soared across the makeshift screen, their wings spread wide, their shadows dancing in perfect synchronization. "Twin eagles," Bodaway breathed, recognizing the characters from the stories Holden had been telling them. "Would you like to hear about their greatest adventure?" Holden asked, his hands still moving, creating a mountain peak where the eagles could perch. Both boys nodded eagerly. settling against their mother's sides as Holden's voice took on the rhythmic cadence of a born storyteller. "There was a night," he began, "when the greatest storm in memory swept across the mountains where the twin eagles lived. Lightning split trees, wind toppled ancient rocks, and all the forest creatures huddled in their burrows, afraid. His hands created the storm, jagged lightning, swaying trees, small animals cowering. The boys watched with rapt attention, completely absorbed in the shadow play. But the twin eagles weren't afraid," Holden continued. "They had learned something important from their wise mother. Storms don't last forever, and sometimes the most beautiful moments happen in the spaces between lightning and thunder." Serena found herself as mesmerized as her sons, watching Holden's profile in the lamplight, seeing the concentration and joy on his face as he wove magic from nothing but light and shadow and the movement of his hands. "So instead of hiding," he went on, "the twin eagles spread their wings and danced with the storm. They soared between raindrops, raced the wind, and discovered that they were stronger and braver than they'd ever known. The shadow eagles on the wall spiraled upward, their dance a celebration of courage and joy that made Bodaway clap softly and Kajika lean forward with wonder." And when morning came, Holden concluded, the storm had washed the sky clean, and the twin eagles could see farther than ever before. They realized that the storm hadn't been something to survive, it had been something to grow through. As if summoned by the story's ending, the real storm outside began to quiet, the thunder rolling away toward distant mountains. "I want to dance with storms," Bodaway announced seriously. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like the twin eagles." "You already are," Serena said softly, smoothing his dark hair. "Both of you. You're the bravest little eagles I know." Kajika yawned, the excitement and warmth making him drowsy. "Mr. Holden, will you tell us that story when we have bad dreams, about being brave in storms?" "Always," Holden promised, and Serena saw him swallow hard at the simple trust in her son's voice. But as if conjured by mention of bad dreams, Kajika's sleepy peace shattered. His eyes went wide with sudden terror, his small body rigid with a fear that seemed to come from nowhere. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No! Don't take us. We don't want to go with the angry man." He was asleep but dreaming, caught in some nightmare that made him thrash against his mother's arms. Bodaway immediately moved to his brother's side, taking Kajika's hand with protective instinct. "It's okay, Kaji," he whispered. "I won't let the angry man hurt you." "The angry man who looks like us but doesn't want us," Kajika sobbed, still trapped in the dream. "He's coming to take us away from Mama and Mr. Holden." Serena's heart broke as she realized her 6-year-old was having nightmares about Alaric's custody threats. She held him close, whispering reassurances, but the terror had taken hold. Without hesitation, Holden knelt beside them, his voice gentle but sure. "Kajika, listen to my voice. You're safe. You're here with your mama and your brother and me, and nothing bad is happening." The sound of Holden's calm certainty seemed to reach through the nightmare's grip. Kajika's breathing began to slow, his rigid muscles relaxing. "Tell me about the twin eagles," Holden continued softly. "What did they do when they were scared?" They remembered they could fly," Kajika whispered, still mostly asleep, but responding to the familiar story. "That's right. And what else?" "They stayed together. They protected each other. And most importantly?" Kajika's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Holden's kind face. "They remembered that their mama loved them, and that was enough to make them brave." "Exactly." Holden reached out slowly, giving Kajika time to pull away if he wanted. When the boy leaned into his touch instead, Holden's voice grew thick with emotion. "You are loved, little eagle, so very loved, and no angry man can ever change that." Serena watched this gentle exchange through tears she couldn't stop. Here was this man, this beautiful, patient, loving man, comforting her traumatized child with a tenderness that spoke of infinite capacity for fatherhood. Here was the father her boys had never had, the partner she'd never dared to dream of, the love she'd thought she didn't deserve. As Kajika drifted back to peaceful sleep in the circle of their protection, Serena felt Holden's hand cover hers, where it rested on her son's shoulder. His fingers were warm, steady, real. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For loving them, for being here, for ... She struggled for words that could encompass the magnitude of what he'd given them. "For showing them what a real father looks like." Holden's grey eyes met hers in the lamplight, and she saw her own longing reflected there, complicated by fear, strengthened by hope, complicated again by the knowledge that loving her meant accepting the battle that was coming. "Serena," he said quietly, "I need you to know. Whatever happens with Alaric, whatever legal fights are ahead, I'm not going anywhere. These boys, this family we've become, it's everything to me." The words hung between them like a promise and a prayer. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and full of possibility. But inside the library's warm embrace, with her children safe in their arms and love growing like wildflowers in the spaces between heartbeats, Serena wondered if she was finally brave enough to dance with her own storm. Maybe, she thought, as Holden's thumb traced gentle circles on her hand, maybe love wasn't the risk she'd feared it was. Maybe love was the courage she'd been searching for all along. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Vivian Vaughn looked like she'd aged 5 years in the 2 weeks since her confession on Serena's porch. Her usually perfect composure replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone living with unbearable knowledge. She waited in the shadows behind Lamasi's flower shop, checking her watch every few seconds like a woman running out of time. When Serena finally appeared, walking hand in hand with her boys as they headed to the library for their afternoon ritual of stories and homework, Vivienne stepped out with the desperate urgency of someone carrying terrible news. "Serena, please," she called softly. "I need to speak with you, alone." Bodaway immediately moved protectively closer to his mother, his 6-year-old instincts recognizing threat even when it came wrapped in designer clothes and careful makeup. "Mama, is this the lady who helps the angry man hurt people?" The innocent question hit Vivian like a physical blow, and Serena saw her flinch with guilt and pain. "Boys, go ahead to Mr. Holden," Serena said gently. "Tell him I'll be there in a few minutes." "Are you sure, Mama?" Kajika asked, his dark eyes serious beyond his years. "We can stay and protect you." The offer from her small son made Serena's chest tight with love and pride. "I'm sure, little eagle. This lady just needs to tell me something important." She watched her sons run toward the library, their backpacks bouncing, their voices calling out to each other in the easy joy of children who felt safe in their world. Then she turned back to Vivian, whose hands were shaking as she clutched a manila envelope. "He's filing the papers tomorrow," Vivian said without preamble. "Emergency custody petition. He's claiming you're an unfit mother who kidnapped his children and disappeared for 6 years. Serena had been expecting this, but hearing it confirmed still felt like being punched in the stomach. What's his evidence? Lies mostly, but lies told by expensive lawyers in expensive suits to judges who don't know you. Vivian held out the envelope with trembling fingers. "I copied everything. His legal strategy, the private investigator's report, the character witnesses he's lined up." Character witnesses. Serena took the envelope, noting how its weight seemed to contain the power to destroy everything she'd built. "People who'll testify that you were unstable during your marriage, that you had emotional problems, that you were jealous and possessive and made threats." I know." Vivian's voice cracked. "I was there, remember? I saw how he treated you, how he isolated you, how he made you believe you were crazy for questioning his lies. But these people, they only saw what he wanted them to see. The times you cried at dinner parties, the times you seemed withdrawn or anxious. They'll paint it as mental instability. Serena opened the envelope with steady hands, though her heart was racing. Inside were photocopied legal documents, private investigator reports, and a list of names that made her blood run cold. People she'd considered friends during her marriage, people who'd witnessed her lowest moments without understanding their context. "There's more," Vivian continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows about you and Holden. The investigator has photos of you together, documentation of how much time you spend at the library, witness statements about how close you've become. There's nothing inappropriate. It doesn't matter." Vivian's laugh was bitter. "He's going to paint you as an adulteress who abandoned her marriage for another man, who's now exposing his children to an inappropriate relationship." Serena stared at a photograph of herself and Holden in his workshop, her hand on his shoulder as they looked at her restored journal together. The image was innocent, but could easily be twisted to look intimate, suggestive. "Why are you showing me this?" Serena asked. "Why risk everything to warn me?" Vivienne was quiet for a long moment, staring at the library where the sound of children's laughter could be heard through the open windows. "Because 6 years ago I helped destroy a family," she said finally. "I told myself that Alaric's marriage was already broken, that you didn't really love each other, that I was just giving him an excuse to leave something that wasn't working anyway." She paused, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "But I was wrong. I saw the way you looked at him, even after he'd been cruel to you. I saw the way you tried to make things work, how you blamed yourself for his distance. I saw a woman who loved completely, even when that love wasn't deserved or returned." "Vivian, no, let me finish." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "I spent 6 years married to a man who never loved me the way you loved him. 6 years watching him drink too much and blame everyone else for his failures. 6 years knowing that I helped him destroy the best thing that ever happened to him." Through the library windows, they could see Holden reading to a small group of children, Bodaway and Kajika nestled close to his sides like they belonged there. The sight made Vivian's face soften with something like wonder. "Those boys," she whispered. "They're beautiful and happy and loved in a way I've never seen children loved before. You did that, Serena. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something miraculous." "They saved me," Serena said quietly. "When I thought I had nothing left to live for, I realized I had everything. I had them. And now you have him too." Vivienne nodded toward the library. "That man in there. He loves you the way you deserved to be loved 6 years ago, the way every woman deserves to be loved." "I'm terrified," Serena admitted. "Terrified that if I let myself love him, Alaric will find a way to use it against my boys. Terrified that I'll drag Holden into a battle he never asked for." "From what I've seen," Vivian said gently, "he's already in the battle. The question is whether you're going to let him fight beside you or make him fight alone." They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the windows as Holden helped Kajika sound out words in a picture book, his patience infinite, his joy in the child's success genuine. "There's something else," Vivian said, her voice taking on a new urgency. "Alaric's planning something for the Harvest Festival next week. He wants to make a public scene, force a confrontation in front of the whole town. He thinks if he can provoke you into an emotional response, it will support his claims about your instability." "What kind of scene?" "I don't know exactly, but he's been drinking more, and he's desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things." Serena folded the papers back into the envelope, her mind already working through strategies and contingencies. "Thank you for this, for the warning, for everything." "I should go," Vivian said, glancing around nervously. "If he finds out I've been talking to you, why don't you leave him?" The question hung between them, honest and direct. Vivian's laugh was hollow. And go where? Do what? I gave up my career, my friends, my independence to be Mrs. Alaric Vaughan. I'm 34 years old with no job skills and no identity beyond being his wife. She paused, looking at Serena with something like envy. You were braver than I am. You left with nothing and built everything. I left because I had to, because staying would have killed something in me that my children needed to survive. Maybe, Vivian said quietly, maybe I need to find something in me that deserves to survive too. She walked away without another word, leaving Serena standing alone with the weight of knowledge and the terrible clarity of what was coming. Inside the library, she found Holden reading with her sons, the three of them arranged on the old leather couch like a family portrait of everything she'd ever wanted. The sight made her chest tight with love and fear in equal measure. "Mama!" Bodaway called when he saw her. "Mr. Holden is teaching us about bookbinding. He says maybe we can make our own book of eagle stories." "That sounds wonderful," she managed, though her voice felt strange in her throat. Holden looked up from the book, and his expression immediately shifted from joy to concern. He could read her face like a favorite story, she realized, could see the fear and heartbreak written in her eyes. "Boys," he said gently, "why don't you pick out some books to take home? Your mama and I need to talk for a minute." They scattered toward the children's section with the eager efficiency of children who'd been given permission to choose treasures. Once they were out of earshot, Holden stood and moved toward her with the kind of careful concern that made her heart ache. "What's wrong?" She handed him the envelope without a word, watching his face as he scanned the contents. She saw the moment he understood the scope of what they were facing, saw his jaw tighten, his eyes harden with protective fury. "These photos," he said quietly, "they make it look like we're—" "I know. But we've never even—" He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "I would never do anything to compromise you or the boys." "I know that too." They stood facing each other in the golden afternoon light, the weight of unspoken feelings and impossible choices heavy between them. Serena could see her own longing reflected in his eyes, complicated by fear and determination, and the terrible knowledge that loving each other might be the very thing that destroyed her family. "Maybe," she whispered, "maybe we should stop seeing each other until after the custody hearing, to protect—" "No." The word came out sharper than he'd intended, and he softened his voice immediately. "No, Serena. I won't let him drive us apart with threats and manipulation. That's exactly what he wants." "But if it costs me my boys—" Holden stepped closer, his hands hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her, but didn't dare. "Those boys love you more than life itself. Any judge with eyes can see that. And they love me too, not because I'm trying to replace their father, but because I love them back. I love them, and I love you, and I won't apologize for that." The confession hung between them like a gift and a burden. Serena's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back all day. "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." For a moment, they stood frozen in the space between wanting and having, between love and fear, between the life they could build together and the battle they'd have to fight to keep it. Then Holden's control broke, and he kissed her. It was soft and desperate and full of 6 years of suppressed longing. Serena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart racing with joy and terror in equal measure. For just a moment, the world narrowed to this, his lips on hers, his arms around her, the feeling of being cherished and protected and loved. Then reality crashed back in, and she pulled away, her cheeks wet with tears. "We can't," she whispered. "Not yet. Not until—" "I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "But Serena, whatever happens, Whatever he tries to do to us, I'm not going anywhere. Do you understand? I'm not leaving you to fight this alone." She nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. Through the windows, the October sun was setting over Willowbrook, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The storm was coming. But for the first time since returning home, Serena thought she might be strong enough to weather it. Chapter 7. Roots and Wings. The children's book lay open on Serena's kitchen table like a window into her son's souls, its pages filled with careful crayon drawings and words printed in the determined handwriting of 6-year-old artists who had something important to say. "Once upon a time," Bodaway read aloud, his finger following each word, "there were twin ravens who thought they were ugly because they were different from all the other birds." Beside him, Kajika turned the page to reveal his illustration. 2 small black birds perched alone on a bare branch, while colorful songbirds flew in the distance, their beaks turned away in obvious rejection. Kajika continued the story. The twin ravens had beautiful black feathers that shone like midnight stars. Wrong, that they should be bright yellow or pretty red instead. Serena sat across from them at the table, her coffee growing cold as she watched her children pour their truth onto paper in the way that only children could, without filters, without shame, with the kind of honesty that could break your heart and heal it simultaneously. Holden stood behind her chair, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder as he studied the boy's artwork with the reverence it deserved. They'd been working on this book for the past week, ever since hearing about Willowbrook Elementary's annual Harvest Festival arts competition, and what had started as a simple school project had become something much deeper. "Turn the page, Bodaway," Tallulah encouraged from her spot at the kitchen island, where she was supposedly reviewing legal documents, but had become completely absorbed in the story. "I need to know what happens next." Bodaway grinned and flipped to a new illustration, the twin ravens flying toward a wise owl perched in an ancient oak tree, her eyes kind and knowing. "One day," he read, "the twin ravens met a very wise owl who told them something important. She said that being different wasn't wrong, it was what made them special. She said their black feathers weren't ugly, they were beautiful in their own way." "And strong," Kajika added, pointing to his drawing of the owl. "The wise owl said ravens were some of the smartest birds in the forest, and that their mama had chosen their colors because black was powerful and important." Serena felt tears gathering in her eyes as she recognized the metaphor her children had created. The wise owl looked remarkably like Mrs. Olathe, the librarian emeritus who had become their unofficial grandmother, offering stories and cookies and the kind of unconditional acceptance that helped children believe in their own worth. "What did the twin ravens do then?" Holden asked softly, his fingers tightening slightly on Serena's shoulder. Kajika turned another page, revealing a picture that made everyone at the table catch their breath. The twin ravens were soaring high above a forest, their wings spread wide, their black feathers gleaming with hidden rainbows. Below them, other birds looked up in wonder and admiration. "They learned to fly high," Kajika said proudly, "higher than any of the other birds, and when they did, everyone could see how beautiful they really were." The end. "Oh, my darlings," Serena whispered, pulling both boys into her arms. "That's the most beautiful story I've ever heard." "It's about us," Bodaway explained seriously. "We're the twin ravens, and you're the mama raven who taught us to fly, and Mr. Holden is like the wise owl who tells us we're special." Holden's breath caught audibly at being included in their story, and when Serena looked up at him, she saw his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Can we enter it in the contest?" Kajika asked. "Mrs. Patterson said we could if we want to." "Of course," Serena said, though her heart clenched with worry about making her children so publicly visible just as Alaric was preparing his legal attack. "But remember, the important thing isn't winning. The important thing is that you told your truth." "Mama," Bodaway said, his 6-year-old wisdom shining in his steel blue eyes. When we tell our truth, we already win, because truth makes you free, right? The simple statement hit everyone at the table with the force of revelation. Out of the mouths of babes, Serena thought, came the kind of clarity that adults spent lifetimes seeking. Right, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Truth makes you free. But even as she spoke the words, Serena felt the weight of approaching storm clouds. Tomorrow was the harvest festival, and Vivian's warning about Alaric's planned confrontation echoed in her mind like a threat. She'd spent the past week consulting with lawyers, preparing for the custody hearing and trying to shield her children from the worst of her fears. Now, looking at their beautiful book, this testament to resilience and self-worth that they'd created together, she realized they were stronger than she'd known. All of them. "You know what?" she said suddenly, her voice gaining strength and determination. "Let's practice presenting your book. The festival is tomorrow, and I want everyone to hear your story exactly the way you want to tell it." For the next hour, they transformed the kitchen into a presentation space. Holden helped the boys set up a makeshift reading area, while Tallulah and Serena played the role of audience. The twins took turns reading pages, their voices growing more confident with each repetition, their pride in their work evident in every gesture. And the moral of the story, Bodaway concluded with the dramatic flair of a born performer, is that being different is beautiful, and you don't need anyone else to tell you you're worth loving. "Because you already are," Kajika added quietly. "You always were." The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of Tallulah sniffling and Holden clearing his throat roughly. Even practiced in the safety of their own home, the story carried power that took everyone's breath away. "Boys," Holden said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "that's the most important thing anyone could ever learn, and you figured it out all by yourselves." "We had help," Bodaway said generously. "We had our mama, and we had you, and we had all the people who love us. That's how we learned we were worth loving." The words hung in the air like a benediction, and Serena felt something shift inside her chest. Fear transforming into fierce determination, doubt crystallizing into absolute certainty. Her children knew who they were, they knew they were loved, and they knew their own worth. Whatever Alaric tried to do to them tomorrow, whatever lies he told or scenes he made, he couldn't touch that. He couldn't take away what she'd given them, what Holden had helped reinforce, what their chosen family had built together. "I'm proud of you," she told them, her voice steady and strong. "So incredibly proud. Tomorrow, when you tell your story to everyone at the festival, remember that you're not just twin ravens learning to fly, you're teachers showing other people how to see their own beauty." As if summoned by her words of determination, the doorbell rang. Serena's stomach clenched with immediate anxiety. Evening visitors usually brought bad news, but when she opened the door, she found Wachiwi standing on her porch with a warm smile and a covered dish. "I brought soup," the dance teacher announced, brushing past Serena into the house. "And I wanted to check on my favorite little eagles before their big day tomorrow." Wachiwi had become a regular fixture in their lives over the past month, working with the boys through movement to help them process their emotions and express their strength. She was a small woman with graying braids and eyes that seemed to see straight through to the heart of things. "Miss Wachiwi," the boys called, abandoning their book to race toward her with the enthusiasm of children who'd found another adult worth trusting. "Let me see this story I've been hearing about," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor with them as if she were 6 years old herself. They read it to her again, their confidence growing with each telling, their voices strong and clear. When they finished, Wachiwi sat in thoughtful silence for a long moment. "This story," she said finally, "reminds me of something my grandmother used to tell me. She said that every child is born with two things, roots to ground them and wings to help them soar. The most important thing a parent can do is help them find both. She looked directly at Serena with knowing eyes. Your boys have deep roots, she continued. They know where they come from. They know they're loved. They know their own worth. And now they're learning to use their wings. Tomorrow, when they tell their story, they'll teach other people about both. What if, Serena began, then stopped, not wanting to voice her fears in front of the children. What if the angry man comes? Bodaway asked with the directness of childhood. What if he tries to make Mama sad again? Wachiwi's expression grew serious, but calm. Then we remember what the twin ravens learned, that other people's opinions can't change who we really are, that love is stronger than anger, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand up tall and tell our truth, even when it's scary. She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 small items, matching necklaces with small raven feathers hanging from leather cords. These are for you, she said, placing them around the boys' necks. Real raven feathers, blessed by my grandmother's prayers. When you wear them tomorrow, remember that you're not just telling a story, you're flying. Bodaway and Kajika touched their feathers with reverent fingers, their faces solemn with the weight of the gift. Will you be there tomorrow? Kajika asked, when we present our book? I wouldn't miss it, Wachiwi promised, and neither will anyone else who loves you. You'll have your whole flock there, cheering you on. As the evening wound down and their guests prepared to leave, Serena felt a sense of calm determination settling over her like armor. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. She had raised warriors disguised as 6-year-olds, and they had taught her how to be brave. Mama, Bodaway said as she tucked them into bed, are you scared about tomorrow? A little, she admitted, because honesty was the foundation of everything they'd built together. But I'm also proud and excited. You boys are going to show everyone how strong and beautiful you are. And you and Mr. Holden will be there? We'll be right there in the front row, she promised. Always. Kajika reached up to touch his raven feather one more time. Mama, I think tomorrow we're really going to fly. As she kissed them goodnight and turned off their bedroom lights, Serena realized her youngest son was right. Tomorrow, they would all learn to fly. And this time, nothing, not fear, not threats, not the desperate cruelty of a man who'd never learned to love, would clip their wings. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The Willowbrook Elementary Gymnasium had been transformed into an autumn wonderland, complete with hay bales, pumpkins, and handmade banners celebrating the harvest festival. But Serena could barely see the decorations through the haze of her protective focus as she watched her sons take the small stage. Bodaway and Kajika stood side by side at the microphone, their matching raven feather necklaces catching the overhead lights, their handmade book clutched in Bodaway's steady hands. The entire community had gathered, parents, teachers, grandparents, and townspeople who remembered when stories mattered more than entertainment, and their faces turned toward the twins with the kind of expectant attention that could make or break a child's confidence. Our story is called The Twin Ravens Who Learned to Fly, Bodaway announced, his 6-year-old voice carrying clearly through the quiet gymnasium. We wrote it and drew it ourselves, and it's about finding out you're beautiful even when other people can't see it. Serena sat in the front row beside Holden, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Behind them, she could feel the supportive presence of their chosen family, Tallulah with her legal mind ready for battle, Wachiwi with her grandmother's wisdom, Olathi with her encyclopedic knowledge of Willowbrook's history, and Lamasi, who had closed her flower shop early to be here. But she could also feel the hostile energy radiating from the back of the room, where Alaric had positioned himself near the exit like a predator waiting to strike. Kajika opened the book to the first page, his illustration of 2 lonely ravens displayed for everyone to see. Once upon a time, he read in his softer voice, there were twin ravens who thought they were ugly because they were different from all the other birds. A hush fell over the audience as the simple truth of the opening line resonated. This wasn't just a children's story, it was something deeper, more honest, more real than the usual festival presentations. The boys continued reading, their voices growing stronger with each page, their confidence building as they saw understanding and compassion blooming on the faces before them. When they reached the part about the wise owl who taught the ravens about their own worth, Serena noticed several adults wiping their eyes. And then, Bodaway read, his voice taking on the dramatic cadence of a born storyteller, the twin ravens spread their wings and flew higher than any bird in the forest, and when they did, everyone could see how beautiful their black feathers really were. He turned to the final illustration, the ravens soaring above the forest, their wings spread wide, their feathers gleaming with hidden rainbows, and the gymnasium erupted in spontaneous applause. The moral of our story, Kajika concluded, his small voice somehow carrying to every corner of the room, is that being different is beautiful, and you don't need anyone else to tell you you're worth loving, because you already are, you always were. The applause was thunderous, genuine, the kind of response that came from hearts touched by unexpected truth. Serena felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her children bow with the dignity of artists who had shared something precious with the world. But before they could leave the stage, Alaric's voice cut through the celebration like a blade. "Very touching," he called out, his words slightly slurred with alcohol and carrying the kind of false joviality that made everyone in the room tense with unease. Though I have to wonder where these boys learned such creative storytelling, certainly not from their mother's side of the family. The gymnasium fell silent, the joyful atmosphere poisoned by the sudden intrusion of adult conflict into what should have been a celebration of childhood achievement. "Daddy." Bardaway's confused voice echoed through the microphone as he stared at the man with his eyes who was looking at him with something that wasn't love. The single word, spoken with such innocent hope, made Serena's heart shatter. Despite everything, despite all their conversations about the angry man, her son had still harbored some small hope that his biological father might want to know him. "That's right, son," Alaric said, pushing through the crowd toward the stage with the kind of aggressive purpose that made people step back instinctively. "I'm your daddy, your real daddy. Not the pretender who's been playing house with your mother." "Alaric, stop," Serena said, rising from her seat, but her voice was lost in the sudden murmur of confused conversation that rippled through the crowd. "Stop?" Alaric laughed, the sound harsh and ugly in the decorated gymnasium. "Stop talking to my own children? Stop trying to have a relationship with the sons you stole from me?" Holden stood as well, moving protectively toward the stage, but Alaric was already climbing the steps, his expensive suit wrinkled, his cologne unable to mask the smell of whiskey. "Boys," he said, his voice taking on a false warmth that fooled no one. "How would you like to come live with Daddy, in a real house, with real toys, instead of hiding in libraries and pretending stories are more important than family?" Kajika immediately moved closer to his brother, their instinctive protection of each other heartbreaking to witness. "We don't want to," he said quietly. "We want to stay with Mama and Mr. Holden." Alaric's face darkened with rage, the false charm falling away to reveal the ugly truth beneath. "You don't get to choose, you little brat. I'm your father, and what I say goes." He reached out to grab Kajika's arm, and everything happened at once. Bodaway stepped protectively in front of his brother with the fierce courage of a child defending his family. "Don't touch him! You're not our papa. Our papa reads us stories and makes us feel safe and loves us." "Your papa," Alaric's voice rose to a shout, "that nobody librarian who's been warming your mother's bed while she played the grieving widow? The accusation hung in the air like poison, and Serena felt the eyes of the entire community turn toward her with varying degrees of shock, judgment, and sympathy. But before she could respond, before Holden could move to protect her reputation, Olathi's clear voice cut through the tension from the back of the room. "That's enough, Alaric Vaughan." The elderly librarian rose from her seat with the authority of someone who had witnessed 78 years of human drama and wouldn't tolerate cruelty in her presence. "This is a children's festival," she continued, her voice carrying the kind of steel that made even grown men sit up straighter. "These boys have just shared a beautiful story about overcoming rejection and finding worth, and you've chosen to prove every word of it by rejecting them publicly. This is between me and my family." "Family?" Olathi's laugh was sharp as winter wind. "You abandoned a pregnant wife with a note calling her children a mistake. You divorced her before they were born and married your secretary before their first birthday. You've never paid a dime of support, never sent a birthday card, never shown the slightest interest in their existence until this moment." The crowd murmured agreement, and Serena realized that Olathi wasn't just speaking as a concerned citizen. She was presenting a defense that sounded suspiciously like legal testimony. "And now," Olathi continued relentlessly, "you show up drunk to a children's event, make threatening gestures towards 6-year-olds, and accuse their mother of impropriety because she's found happiness with a man who knows how to love children properly." "Those are my sons!" Alaric screamed, his composure completely shattered now. "My blood! And I'll be damned if I let some nobody librarian steal them from me." He lunged toward Kajika again, and this time his intention was clearly to physically remove the child from the stage, but Holden was faster. Moving with surprising speed for such a gentle man, he intercepted Alaric's grab, catching his wrist in a grip that looked casual but made Alaric's face contort with pain. "Touch them," Holden said quietly, his voice carrying easily through the silent gymnasium. "And you'll discover exactly how much this nobody librarian is willing to protect the children he loves." For a moment, the two men faced each other, Alaric with his bloated rage and expensive clothes, Holden with his lean strength and absolute moral certainty. There was no contest. Physical intimidation meant nothing when faced with the quiet power of someone defending his family. "Get your hands off me," Alaric snarled, but he made no further move toward the children. "Gladly," Holden replied, releasing him, "as soon as you step away from the stage and leave these boys alone." "This isn't over," Alaric spat, backing toward the steps. "Those boys are mine, and I'll prove it in court. I'll take them away from both of you." He stumbled off the stage, but before he could leave the gymnasium entirely, Bodaway's clear voice followed him. "We don't want you to be our daddy," the 6-year-old announced with devastating honesty. "Real daddies love their children and take care of them and don't make them scared. You just make people sad." The simple truth of it hit Alaric like a physical blow. He turned to stare at his biological sons, these beautiful, brave, articulate children who shared his eyes but none of his character, and for a moment, something that might have been regret flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar rage that had always been his answer to accountability. "We'll see about that," he muttered, and stumbled out of the gymnasium into the night. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of Kajika's quiet crying and the rustle of hundreds of people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Others joined in, and within moments the entire gymnasium was erupting in supportive applause, not for the performance, but for the courage they'd just witnessed. Serena climbed onto the stage and gathered her sons into her arms, feeling their small bodies trembling with the aftermath of confrontation and the overwhelming support of their community. "You were so brave," she whispered into their hair. "So incredibly brave." "Is he going to take us away?" Kajika asked, his small voice muffled against her shoulder. "No," Holden said firmly, joining them on the stage and wrapping his arms around all three of them. "He's not. We won't let him." Around them, the community of Willowbrook continued to applaud, and Serena realized that something fundamental had shifted in the past few minutes. This wasn't just about a custody dispute anymore. This was about a town choosing love over law, chosen family over biology, and the kind of courage that could only come from 6-year-old children who refused to accept rejection as truth. As they left the stage together, Serena, her sons, and the man who had proven himself their father in every way that mattered, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. The battle wasn't over, but they had already won the most important victory. They had won each other. Chapter 9. Between Darkness and Dawn. The courthouse steps felt like the edge of the world as Serena climbed them 3 weeks after the Harvest Festival confrontation, her son's small hands warm in hers, their matching raven feathers catching the weak November sunlight that filtered through gathering storm clouds. "Remember what we practiced," she murmured to Bodaway and Kajika as they approached the imposing granite building where their future would be decided. "Tell the truth, be respectful, and know that no matter what happens, you are loved." "Will Mr. Holden be there?" Kajika asked, his voice smaller than usual, despite the brave face he'd worn all morning. "He'll be right there with us," Serena promised, though her heart clenched at the knowledge that Holden couldn't sit at their table, couldn't officially be part of their legal family, no matter how essential he'd become to their emotional one. Inside the courthouse, the waiting room buzzed with nervous energy. Tallulah sat with a stack of legal documents that represented weeks of preparation, her lawyer's armor of competence and confidence firmly in place. Across the room, Alaric huddled with his expensive legal team, his face bearing the bloated marks of someone who'd spent the weeks since the festival drowning his humiliation in alcohol. "How are you holding up?" Holden asked quietly, settling beside Serena on the hard wooden bench. He'd taken time off from the library to be here, though they all knew his presence might be used against them by Alaric's lawyers. "Terrified," she admitted honestly, "but also ready. Whatever happens, we've done everything we could." The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of depositions, character witnesses, and legal maneuvering. Vivienne had provided devastating testimony about Alaric's abandonment and current behavior, while teachers, neighbors, and community members had lined up to speak about Serena's exemplary mothering and the boy's obvious well-being. But courts were unpredictable, and judges were human. The possibility of losing her children remained real and terrifying. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Maria Santos." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Santos entered, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the kind of presence that suggested she'd seen every family drama imaginable and still believed in justice. "Please be seated. We're here today for the custody hearing in the matter of Vaughan versus Langston. I've reviewed all submitted materials, and I want to begin by saying that the welfare of the minor children will be the sole determining factor in my decision." Alaric's lawyer stood first, a man in an expensive suit who specialized in making uncomfortable truths sound reasonable. "Your Honor, my client seeks joint custody of his biological sons, who were taken from him without his knowledge or consent 6 years ago. Mr. Vaughan has established financial stability, remarried to provide a 2-parent household, and wishes to be a father to the children he was denied the opportunity to know." The carefully crafted lies made Serena's stomach turn, but Tallulah had prepared her for this. They would twist the narrative, paint Alaric as the victim, and hope the judge wouldn't see through the manipulation. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "we have concerns about the children's current living situation. Ms. Langston has been cohabitating with an unrelated male, exposing the children to an inappropriate relationship that—" "Objection," Tallulah said sharply, rising to her feet. "Mr. Brennan does not live with my client or her children. He's a respected member of the community who has provided appropriate mentorship and friendship to the family." "Sustained," Judge Santos said dryly, Mr. Harrison, stick to facts rather than insinuations. The hearing continued for what felt like hours. Alaric's team presented their case with practiced precision, financial records showing his income, testimony from his new wife about providing stability, carefully worded statements about his desire to know his children. But when it came time for Alaric himself to testify, the facade began to crumble. Mr. Vaughan, Tallulah began her cross-examination with the precision of a surgeon. When did you first meet your biological sons? They were... Miss Langston kept them from me. Please answer the question. When did you first meet Bodaway and Kajika Langston? Alaric's face flushed red. At the school festival last month. So you're seeking custody of children you've never met before last month? That's not my fault. She disappeared. Mr. Vaughan, did you or did you not leave a note for your pregnant wife stating that the children she was carrying were a mistake? The courtroom fell silent. Alaric glanced desperately at his lawyer, who could only shake his head. It was a difficult time. Did you or did you not divorce Ms. Langston while she was still pregnant, without providing any forwarding address or contact information? I had to move on with my life. Have you paid any child support for these children in the 6 years since their birth? I didn't know where they were. Tallulah's smile was sharp as a blade. Mr. Vaughan, these children have been enrolled in Willowbrook Elementary School for 3 months. Their mother owns property in town and runs a business. A simple internet search would have revealed their location. Did you make any attempt to find them before last month? Alaric's silence spoke louder than any answer could have. When it came time for the children to speak with the judge, Serena's heart nearly stopped. The thought of her 6-year-olds being questioned about their parentage, their feelings, their future, it felt like cruelty disguised as justice. But Judge Santos surprised everyone by requesting that the conversation take place in her chambers, with only the court reporter present. 20 minutes later, Bodaway and Kajika emerged with the quiet dignity that had become their trademark, their raven feathers still gleaming around their necks. How did it go? Serena whispered as they settled beside her. She was nice, Bodaway reported. She asked about our book and our stories, and who takes care of us when we're scared. What did you tell her? The truth, Kajika said simply, that you love us, and Mr. Holden loves us, and we don't want to live anywhere else. The final arguments stretched into the afternoon. Alaric's lawyer made a last desperate attempt to paint Serena as unstable and manipulative, while Tallulah methodically dismantled every accusation with documentation, witness testimony, and the simple power of truth. When Judge Santos finally called for recess to make her decision, the waiting felt endless. They gathered in a small conference room, Serena, the boys, Holden, and Tallulah, sitting in nervous silence as the minutes ticked by. Serena's hands stilled on his tie as she looked up into those grey eyes that had seen her through the darkest chapters of her story and chosen to help her write a new ending. Holden Jet Brennan, you've been their father since the day you first read them stories. Today we're just making it official. Around them, the library had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Lamasi had worked magic with spring flowers, deep purple irises and golden daffodils, branches of cherry blossoms turned pink and white by the season's touch. Books lined the walls like silent witnesses to their love story, and afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows to paint everything in rainbow fractals. It was perfect. Small, intimate, surrounded by the stories that had brought them together and the community that had chosen to love them. "Mama! Mr. Holden!" Bodaway's voice rang through the library as he raced toward them, his small form resplendent in the navy suit that made him look like a prince. Behind him, Kajika followed with more dignity but equal excitement, both boys wearing their precious raven feathers alongside flower boutonnieres that marked them as something more than guests. "Are we really going to be a real family today?" Kajika asked, his 7-year-old wisdom still startling in its directness. "We've been a real family for a long time," Serena said, kneeling to their level and smoothing their hair with maternal hands. "Today we're just telling everyone else what we already know." "And Mr. Holden will really be our papa," Bodaway pressed, needing the reassurance that comes with making dreams concrete. Holden knelt beside Serena, his hands covering their small shoulders with the protective gentleness that had become second nature. "If you'll have me, if you want me to be your papa for real, not just in our hearts." "We've wanted that forever," Kajika said seriously, "since the first story you ever read us." "Then it's settled," Holden said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today I become your papa, and you become my sons, and we all become something beautiful together." The sound of voices in the main library announced the arrival of their guests. Not many, but each one chosen for the love they'd shown this unconventional family. Tallulah had driven up from Boston with her partner, determined not to miss the moment she'd helped make possible. Wachiwi arrived with traditional Native American wedding blessings woven into her silver hair. Olathi came bearing the marriage license and the authority to officiate, having become ordained online specifically for this ceremony. Even Vivienne appeared, slipping quietly into the back row with a small gift wrapped in silver paper and tears already bright in her eyes. She'd left Alaric 4 months ago, finally finding the courage to choose truth over comfort, and while their divorce proceedings were ugly, her freedom felt like another victory for love over fear. "Places, everyone," Olathi called with the gentle authority of someone who'd shepherded countless life transitions. "Love is patient, but wedding guests get restless." The ceremony began with Wachiwi's blessing, her voice carrying the wisdom of generations as she spoke about the sacred nature of chosen family, about love that heals old wounds and creates new possibilities. Then Bodaway and Kajika stepped forward, their young voices clear and strong, as they read a poem they'd written together. "Today our family gets bigger. Today our hearts get stronger. Today we promise to love each other forever and even longer. Mama found someone who sees her light, Papa found the love he was seeking, and we found the father we dreamed about in a man who loves us without speaking. All the words that don't matter when actions say it all. We choose each other, we choose this love, we choose to stand tall." There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering as the boys presented rings they'd helped choose, simple bands that would mark this commitment to build something lasting together. "Serena Aurelia Langston," Holden said when it came time for vows, his voice steady despite the tears tracking down his cheeks. "6 years ago, you walked into my library broken and beautiful, and I knew that you were worth waiting for. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect, it's about being brave enough to heal together. You gave me these incredible children to love and a purpose I never knew I needed. I promise to love you through every storm, to choose you every day, and to prove worthy of the trust you're placing in me." Serena's hands shook as she held his, her own vows spilling out with the honesty that had always marked their most important moments. "Holden, you saw me when I couldn't see myself. You loved my children before they were yours to love. You stood with us through our hardest battle without asking for anything in return, except the chance to be part of our story. I promise to love you with the same patience you've shown us, to build a life with you that honors the journey that brought us together, and to never take for granted the miracle of being chosen by someone who chooses so well." When Olathe pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss that sealed their marriage was soft and profound, and full of 6 years of suppressed longing, finally set free. Around them, their small congregation erupted in joyful applause, but Serena was only aware of Holden's lips on hers and the feeling of coming home to herself. "And now," Olathe announced with theatrical flair, "for the part these boys have been waiting for." The adoption papers had been finalized the week before. Holden officially becoming father to Bodaway and Kajika Brennan, their new last name a choice they'd made together. But today was about more than legal documents. Bodaway and Kajika, Holden said, kneeling before them one more time. I promise to be the father you deserve, to read you stories and teach you to be brave and love you exactly as you are. Will you be my sons? Forever and always, they said together, launching themselves into his arms with the enthusiasm of children who finally had everything they'd dreamed of. The reception was held in the library's main room, with Tallulah champagne toasts and Wachiwe's traditional foods and Lamasi's flower arrangements turning the familiar space into something magical. The boys regaled guests with stories of their new family traditions, their pride in their papa evident in every word. As evening fell and their guests began to depart, Serena found herself standing in the poetry section where she'd once sat broken and bleeding, holding the journal Holden had so carefully restored. Regrets? He asked, joining her among the books that had been silent witnesses to their beginning. Only one, she said, surprising him. I regret how long it took me to believe I deserved this. She opened the journal to a page she'd written just after the custody hearing, new words added to the collection of her journey. I am learning the difference between love that lifts and love that lowers. And I am teaching my children the same lesson by choosing a man who sees eagles when he looks at us and calls us beautiful without needing us to change a single feather. You wrote that for us, Holden said, reading over her shoulder. I wrote it because of us, because you taught me what real love looks like. 1 year later, they stood in the garden of the Ashworth estate, their home now, filled with laughter and books and the comfortable chaos of a family that had chosen each other completely. Serena's children's book series, The Adventures of the Twin Eagles, had become a bestseller, touching children around the world who needed to learn about their own worth. Bodaway and Kajika raced between the flower beds they'd helped plant, their 8-year-old energy focused on catching fireflies in the gathering dusk. They wore new raven feathers, gifts from Wachiwe for surviving their first year as officially adopted children, but their joy was entirely their own. Mama, Papa, Bodaway called, using the names that had become as natural as breathing. Come see the story we're writing about the wise owl who helped the twin eagles find their real family. Serena exchanged a look with Holden that was full of shared wonder at the life they'd built. They'd created something neither had dared to dream of, a love that honored both their histories and their hopes, a family that proved blood mattered less than choice, a home that welcomed healing and growth and the kind of happiness that came from being truly seen. As they walked toward their children, hands intertwined, Serena thought about the letter she'd found tucked in her journal that morning, 6-year-old words she'd written to her future self in a moment of desperate hope. Someday I will be worthy of real love. Someday my children will know their own value. Someday we will have a home where we can be ourselves without fear. Someday the pain will make sense because it led us to something beautiful. Someday had arrived, and it was more beautiful than she'd ever dared imagine. In the gathering twilight of their garden, surrounded by the laughter of children who felt safe in the world and wrapped in the arms of a man who had chosen to love them all completely, Serena Aurelia Langston, Brennan finally understood what coming home really meant. It meant being brave enough to stay when love was real. It meant teaching your children that they were worth fighting for. It meant believing that broken stories could be restored to something more beautiful than they'd ever been before. The twin eagles had learned to soar, and they would never stop flying. The end.